In this video, we'll be going over cloud monitoring for AWS and Azure, and specifically about cloud migration use cases. There's different aspects to cloud migration, whether you're migrating just specific portions like a database or just the servers, or it can be an entire application stack and the associated services as well. And some companies will migrate their entire data center into the cloud. LiveNX capabilities that help with cloud migration include visibility into the cloud, specifically the VPC traffic and the cloud services running through them, and the ability to see end-to-end on-premise and the cloud. In this video, we'll be going through a database migration use case, specifically an on-premise database being migrated into a cloud-based. And we'll look at pre-deployment, the ability to look at capacity and trend and access and dependencies of that on-premise database, and also understand the performance baseline. And as we deploy and run the database in the cloud, understanding the connectivity, as well as the capacity and trends, and security and policy verification of the traffic coming in, as well as performance. So before we do the migration, we want to investigate what that database application, which in this case is Postgres, looks like. So we'll put on the filter to see the application traffic. So here are all the different applications, and this looks specifically at Postgres. So a lot of sites are actually hitting our PostgreSQL backend, the data center, from various parts of the world. Now let's look at it from a report perspective. So we'll go into the reports. So here we could look at the application usage across that whole entire month. So it's pretty consistent, about 4 megabit per second. So you can look at how much network traffic we'd expect, and we can size for that as we migrate into the cloud. So next we'll look at the application performance of this. And just taking a quick baseline of the application performance over the last 30 days or so. So the application delay is pretty consistent across that whole time period. It's about 130 milliseconds. And we could see some retransmissions that happen as well. So if this was caused by scaling issues, that's one of the reasons why we want to move to the cloud. So during deployment, we'll be looking at migrating to a cloud database, and in this case, RDS PostgreSQL. And we'll be using LiveNX to check out the basic connectivity and also capacity and trend analysis once we deploy this. But also any security and policy verifications, making sure that traffic that isn't allowed is rejected. And then lastly, just observing performance from on-premise as it accesses the cloud database. And in the future, we'll have packet-based analytics that can do that in the cloud on the EC2 directly as well. So we're here inside the Amazon RDS console, and we actually do have a PostgreSQL instance already. So there's a lot of steps to the database migration. You have to create the instance, you have to migrate the data, and at some point you'll want to do the cutover. But there's different settings that affect, from a network perspective, how this database migration works. So things like availability zones. Are you making it high availability? Is it going to stripe across multiple zones? How much traffic you're expecting? So those are things that we can use LiveNX to analyze as you deploy. So now that we have RDS running with Postgres in our AWS Oregon region, I just want to double check and look at the connectivity, make sure it's doing what we're expecting it to do. So here we can see all the different types of application. So we have PostgreSQL, I can click on that. So it's coming in, that's kind of what I expected, and it's going to 2 different availability zones or 2 different subnets attached. And I was expecting that since I set up the Postgres for high availability. So as this new database has been migrated to the cloud, we'll take a look at some of the trends. From a capacity perspective, we could look at the traffic over a week period of time. We can see a lot of inbound traffic putting data into the database, a little bit of outbound. And we can look at it from a service flow perspective. So these are all the different services in that particular VPC. And we could look at the share that the RDS uses, and you'll notice that it's across 2 availability zones. So that's exactly how that database was set up, and that's kind of expected. and then a look at the different types of traffic that's coming in from a source perspective. So the majority of traffic is coming in from the US as expected, and there's some other countries. And we'll cover more of this from a security policy analysis in the next section. And we can always go all the way down to the individual conversations to the RDS, and we can see which exact servers or locations are talking to that RDS service. So one of the things that you want to double check is during the migration, you'll set up a security group policy for your RDS service, for example, in this VPC. And here I've actually filtered on just RDS, and we only have PostgreSQL running. So your applications typically should be PostgreSQL, and the majority of this is. So if you look down this list, it's majority PostgreSQL, but you see a bunch of other traffic. And when you scroll down and look through some of these other information, you'll notice that these are actually getting rejected. So it's going into the rejected interface since your security group policy is handling that. So this is a good check during your migration from a network perspective, making sure that your group policy is working, the traffic that you're expecting externally is coming into the right location, and rejected when it's not. So we could take a look at the application performance from some of our campus sites to see in comparison the baseline that we did prior. So you can see the application delay is lower than before, and we can see some of the retransmissions which we can look at, and you can see the internal addresses trying to hit the AWS RDS in the west region. So you can get pretty good performance information from the different sites. And in the future, we'll have an option to put a packet analytics into AWS to do performance from the actual EC2 instances as well. So in this video, we went over LiveNX capabilities for migration, and specifically they looked at database migration, the pre-deployment capacity analysis, and performance baseline. And as we deployed, what that connectivity looked like, and then also verifying the performance from various sites as well. For more information on cloud monitoring, please visit liveaction.com.